The fluorescent lights of the Phoenix hospital room cast a pale glow across the weathered face of Muhammad Ali. Outside, the Arizona desert stretched endlessly under a crimson sunset, but inside room 237, time seemed suspended. The greatest boxer who ever lived lay propped against white pillows, his once powerful hands now trembling slightly from the Parkinson's disease that had been his silent opponent for over 3 decades. "Doctor." Sarah Martinez adjusted her stethoscope and glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 7:15 p.m. on June 1st, 2016. She had been Muhammad's neurologist for the past 8 years, watching as the disease slowly claimed the man who had once floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee. But tonight felt different. There was an unusual clarity in his eyes, a spark that reminded her of the old footage she'd seen of him in his prime. "How are you feeling today, champ?" "Doctor," Martinez asked softly, using the nickname that everyone in the medical facility had adopted for their most famous patient. Muhammad's eyes tracked to her face, and though his speech was labored, his voice carried a weight that made her lean closer. "Doctor, I need to tell you something." Each word was a struggle, but there was an urgency in his tone that she hadn't heard in months. Lonnie Ali, Muhammad's 4th wife and devoted caregiver, sat in the chair beside his bed. She had barely left his side since they'd arrived at the hospital 3 days earlier. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and exhaustion lined her face, but her love for her husband of nearly 30 years remained unwavering. She reached over and gently took his hand, feeling the familiar tremor that had become part of their daily reality. "What is it, honey?" Lonnie whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She had learned to read his expressions, to understand him even when the words came slowly or not at all. Muhammad's breathing was shallow but steady. The room was filled with the quiet hum of medical equipment, monitoring his vital signs, keeping track of a heart that had beaten courageously through countless battles, both in and out of the ring. His daughter Layla had visited earlier that afternoon, along with his son Muhammad Jr. The family knew that their patriarch was in his final days, but none of them were prepared for what he was about to share. "I've been thinking," Muhammad continued, his words punctuated by pauses as he gathered strength, "about everything. All of it." His eyes moved from Dr. Martinez to Lonnie, then to the window where the last rays of sunlight were fading into darkness. Dr. Martinez had seen many patients in their final hours, but there was something profound happening here. Muhammad Ali wasn't just a patient to her anymore. He was a man who had transcended sports, who had stood up for his beliefs when it cost him everything, who had inspired millions around the world. And now, in this sterile hospital room, he seemed to be preparing for one final message. The door opened quietly, and Rashida Ali, another of Muhammad's daughters, stepped inside. She had driven through the night from her home in Las Vegas when she received the call that her father's condition had worsened. Her eyes were red from crying, but she composed herself as she approached the bed. "Daddy," she said softly, kissing his forehead. "I'm here." Muhammad's face brightened slightly at the sight of his daughter. Family had always been everything to him, even during the tumultuous years when his boxing career and activism had pulled him in different directions. Now, surrounded by the people he loved most, he seemed to find a reservoir of strength he hadn't accessed in weeks. "Rashida, my beautiful daughter," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sit, please. I have something important to say." The room fell silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Outside, the Phoenix skyline was beginning to twinkle with lights as the city settled into evening. Muhammad had always loved cities at night, the energy and possibility they represented. He had conquered so many of them. New York, where he'd fought Joe Frazier in the fight of the century. Manila, where he'd battled Frazier again in the thriller. Zaire, where he'd shocked the world by defeating George Foreman. But tonight, in this quiet hospital room, Muhammad Ali was preparing for his most important fight yet. The fight to share his final thoughts with the world, through the people who loved him most. Dr. Martinez noticed that his vital signs had actually stabilized over the past hour. Sometimes, she had observed, patients experienced a phenomenon called terminal lucidity, a brief return of mental clarity and energy before the end. She wondered if that's what she was witnessing now. "Take your time, champ," she said gently. "We're all here and we're listening." Muhammad closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering not just his physical strength, but his emotional courage as well. When he opened them again, there was a determination there that reminded everyone in the room why he had been called the greatest. "I want to talk about forgiveness," he began, his words coming more clearly now than they had in days. "About love, and about what really matters." Lonnie squeezed his hand tighter, feeling tears begin to form in her eyes. She had been married to Muhammad for 29 years, had seen him at his strongest and now at his most vulnerable. But she had never heard him speak with quite this tone before. It was as if he was channeling something deeper than his usual wisdom. "For so many years," Muhammad continued, "people saw me as a fighter, someone who never backed down, who always had something to say." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth, and that was true. "I fought in the ring, I fought outside the ring, I fought for what I believed in." Rashida moved closer to the bed, taking her father's other hand. She remembered growing up with a father who was larger than life, who would come home from training camps and fill their house with laughter and stories. But she also remembered the quieter moments, when he would sit with her and her siblings and talk about life, about treating people with kindness, about standing up for what's right. "But tonight," Muhammad said, his voice growing stronger with each word, "I want to talk about the fights I should have avoided, the anger I should have let go, the people I should have forgiven sooner." The room was completely still now. Even the sounds from the hallway seemed to fade away as everyone focused on Muhammad's words. Dr. Martinez found herself thinking about her own life, her own relationships, the grudges she might be holding on to unnecessarily. Muhammad's breathing became more labored for a moment, and Lonnie looked concerned, but he waved off her worry with a slight movement of his hand. "I'm okay," he whispered. I need to say this." He looked directly at his daughter Rashida. "You know, baby girl, when I was young, when I was Cassius Clay, I thought strength meant never showing weakness. I thought being a man meant never saying sorry, never admitting when I was wrong." Rashida nodded, remembering stories her father had told her about his childhood in Louisville, about the anger that had driven him to boxing in the first place. Someone had stolen his bicycle when he was 12 years old, and young Cassius had told a police officer that he wanted to whoop whoever took it. The officer, Joe Martin, had suggested he learn how to fight first. That moment had changed the course of history. "But I learned something over the years," Muhammad continued. "Real strength, real courage comes from being able to admit when you're wrong. From being able to say, 'I'm sorry,' and mean it. From being able to forgive, even when it's hard." Dr. Martinez glanced at the clock again. It was now 8:30 p.m. She had planned to check on other patients, but something told her that what was happening in this room was more important than anything else she could be doing. She had the sense that she was witnessing something historic, something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. "There are people," Muhammad said, his voice becoming more emotional now. "People I hurt with my words. People I was too proud to apologize to. People I let my ego get in the way of loving properly." Lonnie felt tears streaming down her face now. She knew her husband was thinking about his complicated relationships with some of his children from previous marriages, about feuds with former friends and business associates, about the harsh words he had sometimes spoken in the heat of competition or controversy. "Joe Frazier," Muhammad said suddenly, and everyone in the room understood immediately. The rivalry between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier had been one of the most intense in sports history, but it had also been deeply personal. Muhammad had called Joe ignorant, had compared him to a gorilla, had used words that he later regretted. Joe had carried that hurt with him until his death in 2011, and Muhammad had never fully made peace with the pain he had caused. "I called him terrible things," Muhammad continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I was trying to sell fights to get in his head, but I hurt a good man, a man who deserved better from me. Joe Frazier was a warrior. He was brave, and I should have honored that instead of tearing him down." The room was filled with the sound of quiet crying now. Rashida was sobbing softly, thinking about all the stories she had heard about her father's regrets, about the way he had tried in later years to reach out to people he felt he had wronged. "I tried to call him," Muhammad said, referring to Joe Frazier, before he passed, "but it was too late. He was already too sick, and I never got to tell him how sorry I was, how much I respected him, how much I wished I could take back those words." Dr. Martinez had to wipe away her own tears. She had heard about the Ali-Frazier rivalry, of course, but she had never understood the depth of Muhammad's regret about it. Seeing this proud, strong man acknowledge his mistakes with such raw honesty was profoundly moving. "That's why I'm telling you this now," Muhammad said, looking around the room at each person present. "Don't wait. Don't let pride, don't let ego keep you from saying what needs to be said. Life is too short, too precious, to waste on anger and resentment." Lonnie leaned forward and kissed her husband's forehead. "You're a good man, Muhammad," she whispered. "You've always been a good man, even when you made mistakes." "We all make mistakes, honey," Muhammad replied. "The question is, what do we do about them? Do we learn? Do we grow? Do we become better people?" He paused for a moment, gathering his strength again. Outside, the Arizona night was now fully dark, and the city lights created a beautiful tapestry beyond the hospital window. Muhammad had always found peace in looking at lights in the darkness. They reminded him that even in the darkest times, there was always hope, always beauty to be found. "I want to tell you about something that happened last week," Muhammad said, his voice taking on a different tone, "something that changed everything for me." Everyone in the room leaned forward slightly, sensing that this was the heart of what Muhammad needed to share. Dr. Martinez noticed that his heart rate had actually slowed, as if the act of speaking these truths was bringing him a deep sense of peace. "A young man came to visit me," Muhammad began. "His name was David Thompson. He was maybe 25 years old, African-American, reminded me a little of myself when I was young, full of anger, full of pain." Lonnie remembered the visit. David had been brought by one of the hospital's social workers. He was a former gang member who had been shot and paralyzed from the waist down. The social worker thought that meeting Muhammad might inspire him, might help him find a different path forward. "This young man," Muhammad continued, "he told me his story, about growing up without a father, about the streets, about the violence. He said he had done terrible things, hurt people, and now he was paying the price. He was angry, so angry at the world, at God, at everyone." Muhammad's eyes grew distant as he remembered the conversation. He looked at me, and he said, "Mr. Ali, how do you do it? How do you stay positive when everything is falling apart? When your body betrays you? When you can't do the things you used to do? How do you keep going?" The room was completely silent now, everyone hanging on Muhammad's every word. This was clearly the moment that had crystallized something important for him. the experience that had led to this final message he felt compelled to share. "And you know what I told him?" Muhammad asked, looking directly at Rashida. "I told him about forgiveness, not just forgiving others, but forgiving yourself. I told him that the strongest thing a person can do, the bravest thing, is to look in the mirror and forgive the person looking back." "Doctor." Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. In all her years of medicine, she had seen the healing power of forgiveness, but she had never heard it expressed quite so powerfully. "I told David," Muhammad continued, "that I had spent years being angry too. Angry at the government for taking away my boxing license, angry at people who didn't understand my beliefs, angry at my body for betraying me with this disease. But anger is like poison. It hurts you more than it hurts anyone else." Muhammad's breathing became slightly more labored again, but his determination to finish his story was evident. "David started crying," he said. "This tough young man, this person who had seen so much violence, he just broke down, and he said, 'But Mr. Ali, how do I forgive myself for the things I've done? How do I move forward when I've hurt so many people?'" Lonnie squeezed her husband's hand, remembering how moved he had been by that conversation. Muhammad had talked about it for days afterward, saying that meeting David had reminded him of something important about his own journey. "And that's when it hit me," Muhammad said, his voice growing stronger again. "I realized that I had been asking myself the same question for years. How do you forgive yourself? How do you move forward when you've made mistakes, when you've hurt people you care about?" He looked around the room again, making eye contact with each person present. "The answer," he said, "is that you start by acknowledging the hurt. You don't make excuses. You don't try to justify it. You just admit that you were wrong, and then you commit to being better." Rashida was crying openly now, thinking about her own life, her own mistakes, her own need for forgiveness. Her father's words were reaching something deep inside her, something she hadn't even realized needed healing. "I told David," Muhammad continued, "that every day is a chance to choose love over hate, kindness over cruelty, forgiveness over resentment. And that choice, that's what makes us human. That's what makes us capable of redemption." The heart monitor continued its steady beeping, but everyone in the room felt as if time had stopped. Muhammad Ali, the man who had been known for his quick wit and sharp tongue, was delivering perhaps the most important speech of his life. Not to a crowd of thousands, but to a small group of people who loved him in a quiet hospital room. "Before David left," Muhammad said, "he asked me one more question. He said, Mr. Ali, what do you want people to remember about you?" And you know what I told him? Everyone waited, sensing that this was the culmination of everything Muhammad had been building toward. "I told him," Muhammad said, his voice now filled with emotion, "that I don't want to be remembered as the greatest boxer. I don't want to be remembered for my victories in the ring, or even for my stands outside the ring. I want to be remembered as someone who learned how to love, someone who learned how to forgive, someone who learned that real strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down." The room erupted in quiet sobs. Dr. Martinez had to step away for a moment to compose herself. Lonnie was holding Muhammad's hand so tightly that her knuckles were white. Rashida was leaning against the wall, overwhelmed by the power of her father's words. "That's my message," Muhammad said, his voice now barely above a whisper, but still carrying incredible weight. "That's what I want you to remember, what I want you to share with the world. Love is stronger than hate. Forgiveness is stronger than resentment, and every single day, every single moment, we have the choice to be better than we were before." He closed his eyes for a moment, and everyone in the room held their breath. But then he opened them again, and there was a peace there that hadn't been present before, as if sharing these thoughts had lifted a tremendous weight from his shoulders. "Now," Muhammad said with a slight smile, "I need you all to promise me something." Promise me, Muhammad continued, his voice gaining a clarity that surprised everyone in the room, that you'll carry this message forward, not just my family, but you too, Dr. Martinez, everyone who hears this story, everyone who learns about these final hours. I want them to know that it's never too late to choose love. Doctor. Martinez nodded through her tears, understanding that she was being entrusted with something precious. As a physician, she had always focused on healing the body, but tonight she was witnessing the healing of a soul, and she knew that this experience would change how she practiced medicine for the rest of her career. "Daddy," Rashida said, finding her voice again, "what about us? What do you want us to do after?" Muhammad looked at his daughter with infinite tenderness. "Baby girl, I want you to live, really live. Don't spend your time mourning what's gone. Spend it celebrating what remains. Love your children, love your family, love strangers. Make every day count." The door opened softly again, and Muhammad Jr. entered the room. He had been in the hospital cafeteria, trying to process the reality that his father was dying. At 34 years old, he had struggled for years with living up to the Ali name, with finding his own identity separate from his famous father. But seeing Muhammad now, vulnerable and honest, he felt a connection to his father that had sometimes been elusive. "Dad," Muhammad Jr. said, approaching the bed, "I heard voices. Are you okay?" "Better than okay, son," Muhammad replied, his eyes lighting up at the sight of his boy. "I'm exactly where I need to be, saying exactly what needs to be said." Muhammad Jr. had inherited his father's height and some of his features, but he had always been quieter, more introspective than the man who had proclaimed himself the greatest. Now, as he looked at his father, he saw not the larger-than-life figure from history books, but simply a man who loved his family and wanted to leave them with something meaningful. "I was just telling everyone," Muhammad said to his son, "about the importance of forgiveness, about choosing love over hate, about not waiting until it's too late to say what matters." Muhammad Jr. nodded, understanding immediately. He had his own regrets, his own relationships that needed mending. "Dad, I want you to know that I forgive you for all the times you weren't there when I was growing up. I know boxing and your activism were important. I know you were trying to change the world." Muhammad's eyes filled with tears. "Son, I'm the one who needs to ask for your forgiveness. I missed too many birthdays, too many school events, too many moments that I can never get back. I was so focused on being Muhammad Ali that sometimes I forgot how to just be your father." The conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock on the door. A young nurse named Maria entered, carrying Muhammad's evening medications. She had been caring for him during this hospital stay, and she had grown fond of the gentle man who bore so little resemblance to the brash young boxer she had seen in old documentaries. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Maria said softly. "I can come back later, if you'd prefer." "No, please come in," Muhammad said. "You're part of this too, Maria. You've taken such good care of me, shown me such kindness. I want you to hear this." Maria approached the bed, struck by the unusual energy in the room. She had been a nurse for 15 years, and she had learned to recognize when something significant was happening. The atmosphere tonight felt different, charged with emotion and meaning. "Maria," Muhammad said, "tell me about your family." The question surprised her. "My family, Mr. Ali?" "Yes. Do you have children, parents, people you love?" Maria smiled. "I have 2 daughters, Mr. Ali. Sophia is 8 and Isabella is 12, and my mother lives with us. She helps take care of the girls while I work." "Beautiful," Muhammad said. "And do you tell them you love them every day?" "Yes, sir, every day." "Good. Don't ever stop. Don't ever assume they know. Say the words. Show them. Make sure there's no doubt." Maria felt tears forming in her eyes. She had been drawn to nursing because she wanted to help people, but she had never expected to receive such profound life advice from a patient. "You know," Mohammed continued, "I've been thinking about all the people who have touched my life over the years. Trainers, doctors, nurses, fans, even people I only met for a few minutes. Everyone matters. Everyone has the power to make a difference in someone else's life." Dr. Martinez checked the clock again. It was now 9:45 p.m. Mohammed had been speaking for over 2 hours, longer and more clearly than he had in months. She made a mental note to document this remarkable lucidity in his medical records, but more importantly, she was absorbing every word for her own life. "There's something else I want to tell you all," Mohammed said, his voice taking on a different tone. "Something about fear." Everyone in the room leaned in closer. Muhammad Ali, the man who had faced down some of the most dangerous fighters in the world, who had stood up to the US government, who had never seemed afraid of anything, was going to talk about fear. "People think I was never scared," Muhammad began. "They think because I talked so much, because I was so confident, that I never felt fear. But that's not true. I was scared plenty of times." Lonnie squeezed his hand, remembering conversations they had had over the years about his anxieties, his doubts, his very human moments of uncertainty. "I was scared before every big fight," Muhammad continued. "Scared of getting hurt, scared of losing, scared of disappointing people who believed in me. I was scared when I refused to go to Vietnam, scared of going to jail, scared of losing everything I had worked for." Muhammad Jr. was surprised by this admission. He had grown up hearing stories about his father's fearlessness, his unwavering confidence. Learning that Muhammad had experienced fear made him seem more human, more relatable. "But here's what I learned," Muhammad said. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear and doing what's right anyway. It's acknowledging that you're scared, but not letting that fear control your choices." Maria found herself thinking about her own fears, worrying about her daughters, about her mother's health, about whether she was doing enough as a single parent working long hours at the hospital. "I'm scared now," Muhammad admitted, his voice becoming quieter. "I'm scared of leaving you all behind. Scared of the unknown. Scared that I haven't done enough good in this world to balance out the mistakes I've made." "Oh, honey," Lonnie whispered, "you've done so much good. You've inspired millions of people. You've stood up for justice. You've brought joy to the world." "Maybe," Muhammad said, "but I want to make sure, in these final hours, that I'm doing everything I can to leave something meaningful behind. Not just memories of victories or defeats, but something that can help people live better lives." Rashida moved closer to her father's bedside. "Daddy, you are leaving something meaningful right now. These words, this conversation, it's changing all of us." Muhammad smiled, a genuine expression of joy that transformed his face despite the ravages of his illness. "That's all I ever really wanted," he said. "To make a positive difference. To leave the world a little better than I found it." The room fell silent for a moment. Everyone absorbed in their own thoughts about legacy, about what they wanted their own lives to mean. Outside, the Phoenix night was deep and quiet, the city settling into sleep while this profound conversation continued in room 237. "There's one more story I want to tell you," Muhammad said, breaking the silence, "about the last time I saw my mother." Everyone knew that Odessa Grady Clay, Muhammad's beloved mother, had passed away in 1994. Muhammad had been devastated by her death, and he rarely spoke about those final days. "Mama was in the hospital," Muhammad began, his voice thick with emotion. "She was dying. We all knew it, but she was still trying to take care of everyone else. Even on her deathbed, she was worried about me, about my brothers, about whether we would be okay without her." Lonnie remembered those difficult days. Muhammad had been struggling with his Parkinson's symptoms, and losing his mother had been almost unbearable for him. The last thing she said to me, Muhammad continued, was, "Baby, promise me you'll keep being good to people. Promise me you'll use your gifts to help others." And I promised her I would. Tears were flowing freely now from everyone in the room. The image of Muhammad Ali, the world's most famous athlete, being called baby by his dying mother, was almost too poignant to bear. "I've tried to keep that promise," Muhammad said. "Sometimes I succeeded, sometimes I failed, but I never stopped trying. And that's what I want all of you to do. Keep trying, keep choosing kindness, keep choosing love." Dr. Martinez realized that she was witnessing something extraordinary, a master class in how to face death with dignity, how to use your final moments to uplift others rather than focusing on your own suffering. "You know what the beautiful thing is?" Muhammad asked, looking around the room. "Love doesn't die. The love we share, the kindness we show, the forgiveness we offer, that energy goes on. It touches other people, who touch other people, and it spreads like ripples in a pond." Muhammad Jr. was crying openly now, thinking about all the conversations he wished he had had with his father over the years, all the times he had been too proud or too hurt to reach out. "Dad, I love you," he said simply. "I love you too, son, more than you'll ever know." "I love you, Daddy," Rashida added. "I love you too, baby girl. You've brought such joy to my life." "I love you, Muhammad," Lonnie whispered, leaning down to kiss his forehead again. "And I love you, Lonnie. Thank you for taking this journey with me, for standing by me through everything, for showing me what real love looks like." Even Maria and Dr. Martinez found themselves swept up in this outpouring of love and emotion. It was as if Muhammad's openness and vulnerability had created a sacred space where everyone felt safe to express their deepest feelings. "This is what I want people to remember," Muhammad said, his voice now barely audible, but still carrying tremendous power. "Not the trash talk, not the controversies, not even the victories. I want them to remember that in the end, love is all that matters. Love for family, love for humanity, love for life itself." The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm, but everyone in the room could sense that something was shifting. Muhammad's breathing was becoming more labored, and his eyes were growing heavy. But there was a peace about him that hadn't been there before, as if sharing these final thoughts had completed something important for him. "One last thing," Muhammad whispered, his voice now so quiet that everyone had to lean in to hear him. "When people ask about these final hours, when they want to know what Muhammad Ali said before he died, tell them this. Tell them he said that every person has the power to be great. Not great like a champion, but great like a human being who chooses love over hate, forgiveness over resentment, hope over despair." Dr. Martinez glanced at the clock one final time. It was 11:30 p.m. In just a few hours, the world would lose Muhammad Ali, but the people in this room had received something precious, a final gift of wisdom and love, from a man who had learned, through triumph and struggle, what really mattered in life. "Thank you," Muhammad whispered, his eyes closing peacefully. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for helping me remember who I really am." The room fell into a profound silence, broken only by the quiet sounds of breathing and the gentle hum of medical equipment. Outside, Phoenix slept on, unaware that in one small hospital room, one of the greatest figures of the 20th century had just delivered his most important message, not about boxing or politics or fame, but about the simple, revolutionary power of love and forgiveness. As the night deepened, the people who had witnessed Muhammad Ali's final words carried with them a responsibility to share his message of love, to live with greater kindness, and to remember that true greatness lies not in what we achieve for ourselves, but in how we lift up others along the way. In those final hours, Muhammad Ali had reminded everyone present that while our bodies may fail us, while our voices may grow quiet, the love we share and the kindness we show can echo through eternity, touching lives we may never even know about, creating ripples of goodness that spread far beyond anything we can imagine. Hey, my friends, help me by subscribing to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers, even if you're watching from your TV or computer. Your subscription makes all the difference, and the algorithm will help you see more amazing stories. Leave a like or an emoji in the comments and be part of this growth.